Hey everybody, welcome back to our canning videos. I'll tell you, hey, we've got Rick from Nesco, better known as Metalware, right?
That's right.
Hey, I'll tell you, Rick, you know, it's always interesting to bring somebody like you into the studio here that I consider an expert on canning, an expert on a lot of things, but food has always been your expertise.
Yeah, you know, food preservation is really what we're known for, and I'm passionate about the area specifically, and I always enjoy coming on here and talking to you and your audience about it.
Hey, I'll tell you, it's interesting this morning that you came in here and you're talking about growing up in the UP and really growing up with not having a lot. So, you know, when you come from that environment, you know, you learn how to preserve things to make them last. And this is definitely something that I think more people are really getting back into the canning part of it and preserving food for several different reasons.
You know, Larry, it's always been kind of funny to me because you grow up in a certain environment and you think it's what everybody experiences is.
Right.
And it's not until you kind of, you know, go away from home, maybe you go to college, maybe you just work somewhere else, and you start realizing, you know, what things made it unique. And, you know, growing up in the UP, spending a lot of time with my grandparents and getting experience to whether it be canning or, you know, harvesting food in general, growing your own food, I realized later in life that just what a unique experience it was, and you never know how those experiences of growing up are going to relate to your career later on. I was very fortunate to have that background and experience, and it's certainly paying off today.
That's awesome. Hey, the first thing we're going to start off today is you're going to actually show us how to do dilly beans.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, pickling in general, dilly beans are a pickled vegetable, and it's a high acid food, and that means that we can water bath can it. And I personally just like dilly beans. I like a little bit of spicy in my dilly beans or anything that I'm pickling. We're going to show you how to do that today. And, you know, one of the things I really like about dilly beans in general, why I wanted to show this today, was that this is the type of thing that you can make very easily. Bring it to camp, bring it to your friends. It's great in Bloody Marys. It's great just to pull right out of the jar, have it with you. Doesn't need refrigeration. It's really tasty. It's always better if you make it yourself.
I would agree on that 100%. Hey, so let's go through the processes as far as what we're going to be doing here. And let's rock and roll on her.
Well, that sounds great. So we have a couple right here that we did yesterday, and you can kind of see they really look nice when you're done.
They do look good.
I did them in little half pints. I like this size because, again, if you want to give them to your friends, want to give them to Larry when you go fishing, you know, this is perfect for that. You can do it really in any size. You can do it in half pints, and full quarts. The processing times might be a little bit different. And we always recommend that you go to the USDA, How to Preserve Food. They have all the guidelines on the amount of time. So today we'll go through this and show you our recipe, but the guidelines are out there to tell you how long to process. Go to the USDA guidelines. Just you do a Google search for it. Look it up.
We'll bring that information right up here too.
Super easy to find. Yep. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to show you how to do it. The processing time is about 20 minutes of actual processing time. Making them super easy. Takes us maybe 10 minutes to show you how to make them. So if you want to do this even after dinner one night, super easy to do it, and it doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to wait for the weekend to do it. You can do it after dinner.
Awesome.
Let's get to work.
Yeah.
All right, so the way I like to do it, I'm just going to take the first jar, and I'm going to add just a little bit of crushed red pepper, just a pinch of crushed red pepper. And I'll tell you one thing about canning, a little bit goes a long way.
Why is that?
Well, it's like a marinade, right? So I'm going to put it in the jar. I'm going to take, matter of fact, I'm going to take one jalapeno, not two. Trust me, I made that mistake. And what ends up happening is basically it marinades, it opens up the flavors, and every day it gets a little bit stronger. Same thing with garlic. We're going to put a little bit of garlic in as well. Garlic's one of those things where if I'm cooking right now and I'm throwing it on the griddle, let's just say, I want to use a lot of garlic. But if I'm going to do something like this, now I love garlic.
Me too.
You got to be a little bit conservative with what you use because it gets really strong. So a little bit of garlic. Mustard seed is one of those underrated items, especially when you're canning.
Oh, okay.
You know, mustard seed, you really got to grind it fine to use it in regular cooking. But when you're canning, you can keep it in the full seed. You can put it in the jar, and that flavor is going to open up during the cooking process and then really saturate the food over the next week or two. It's one thing about canning, if you want the best flavor, you got to wait at least a week. Now, if you can wait longer, it gets even more flavor, but at least a week to have all those flavors absorb into the food that you've canned.
Okay.
So we've added our ingredients. Going to put a little bit of dill in there too. Just one stick of dill.
So you're saying I can't eat any of these today? Yeah.
You know, you can. They're perfectly fine to eat, but that flavor in about a week is going to be perfect.
Okay.
And then I'm going to take these green beans right here, and one thing I want to show you, I'm just going to lay them out here. I've cut them about the size of the first ring of the jar. Now, when we fill this with the beans or any food, we can do asparagus too, or pickles, or the cucumbers will make into pickles. You put them in the jar, and you want to leave a little bit of headspace.
Okay.
And this applies whether you're water bath canning or pressure canning. That headspace is really important. And there's there's a tool you can use. We'll bring it out today to show you to measure that headspace. You generally speaking want about a 1/4 inch of headspace. And what that does, it allows that hot air to expand while you're canning. And then when it cools, it creates a vacuum because everything contracts, it creates a vacuum. And you'll see the ones we did yesterday, you'll see that they've dented down or they've contracted down. And when you push on, there's no telltale sign. Now today, when we're done getting this set, I kind of show that to you. But the telltale sign when you're canning is that popping sound after you take them out of the canner and you put them on a towel like that. You'll be in the other room just waiting, you hear that pop, pop sound. That's a good sign, and people who can a lot, that's actually a really good positive reinforcement. You're like, yeah, everything's going well.
So I got to ask you quick, is there any type, I'm a huge vegetable person, love vegetables. Is there any vegetable that you don't recommend doing this to?
Vegetable-wise, no. One of the things you don't really want to can is cured meats. So bacon is one of those things, and you can get uncured bacon and you can can that, but if it's a cured meat, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
Generally speaking, most vegetables are going to be a low acid food, so they're going to require high pressure canning to be able to do it. But most vegetables can be canned. There's some things that turn out better than others. Some things kind of turn to mush when you can them.
Yeah.
Other things like asparagus really can stay crunchy if you do the canning according to the process. But honestly, everything retains its flavor really, really well.
You're probably going to laugh at me, but one of my favorite things canned is beets. Love canned beets.
You love canned beets.
Oh, I love beets.
I tell you what, I will. If I ever can beets, I'll give every single one of them to you. But you know what? Beets are a great one to can. In anything out of your garden. One of the things about gardens, it's great because you get the fresh food right when it comes out. One of the classic things about a garden is that, hey, what do I do with all these tomatoes? What do I do with all this food that I can't eat immediately? I don't want it to go bad. Canning, dehydration, freeze drying. All these things are great ways of taking that garden that you spend all that time weeding, planting, and doing all these things all summer.
It's a lot of work having a garden.
It is, and nothing beats like February, it's cold, we got short days, and I want to have some good food that I made. Canning's a great way to do that. And matter of fact, I would say green beans are a really good example this time of year, or asparagus in the spring. How do I get that flavor throughout the year and make sure that it's something that I grew, that I have pride in, that I enjoy eating? Food preservation helps you do that.
Yeah, and the other part too is that when you look at things now, you go to the grocery store, and I'm sure everybody goes to the grocery store, and you see how expensive things are. The nice part about, at the right time of year, you can go to a lot of these farmer auctions and you can get a lot of product for a very reasonable price.
The farmer's market is a great place to go. You're supporting local business people by doing it. You're getting food that's fresh. It's usually organic. I tell you what, I love going to my local farmer's market because I don't grow everything. Rutabaga is one that I absolutely love. Rutabaga. Ooh. And that's one of those ones at the farmer's market, it's always available to you. Most of the summer you can get it from the farmer's market. I've tried growing it. It takes so much space in my garden that I was like, you know what? Farmer's market's way to go on that particular one.
And I think most people are like that too, Rick, is that most people only have so much room in their garden. They can't grow everything, right?
Right. I know my garden is relatively limited where I'm at. I have the things that I really enjoy growing. I love cucumbers. I like making pickles. So I have a lot of my garden dedicated to that. But anybody who's done that knows it takes up a ton of space when you do that. It
certainly does.
All right, so we've been talking. I've packed these green beans in there. I'm going to push them down, making sure they're all down as far as possible. Now, the reason I do that is I want to make sure that they're in the brine. So I have my brine right here. Now, let me talk about brine for 1 second.
Okay.
Anytime you're pickling, it's really about the brine. And brine is pretty simple to do. It's really, one part vinegar, 1 part water, and a little bit of salt. So I've added those, and we'll have the recipe posted. And we make our brine that way. We bring it to a soft boil. That vinegar really has a lot of flavor to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that brine, I'm going to pour it over the beans. We've packed all the green beans into our half-pint container.
Right.
Now, green beans themselves are actually a low-acid food. So what we're doing by adding a brine is we're lowering the pH level to get a high-acid food so we can water bath can it. Okay. And that's the same with pickles as well. They can be water bath canned. And again, I recommend you go to the USDA guidelines and look if you ever have a question. It's a great resource for anybody who's home canning. So again, we have our brine set right here. As I indicated, we have a vinegar, water, and salt. It's very, very simple. And we're going to fill this up to about 1/4 inch from the top, leaving a little bit of head gap in there. We'll take our measuring cup, scoop a little bit out, and we're going to pour it in slowly but surely. I need just a hair more than that. And that's about, I mean, just a touch more. And there we go. That's about right there. You see, I've got about 1/4 inch of head gap in there. Maybe just a tad more. There we go.
Now, there's still a few beans that are out of the brine.
Now, I can kind of just push them down like this as we go into that. That'll be good. But now, when they cook, they'll shrink a little bit too. The starches will start coming out of the beans.
To make sure.
So it's okay, and it'll be perfectly safe. That's not a problem. But the flavor you don't want to bite into it and you don't have a lot of flavor on top. You want to kind of sit in that brine. I've made sure most of them down, but it will shrink. And you kind of see yesterday when we did ours, you sort of see how they shrunk down just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So now we have that. We have our lids right here. All right, Larry, right now what we're going to do is we're going to fill the jars with brine. Now we have a canning funnel here. I like using it because it keeps everything neat. It prevents spills, and spills, there's nothing wrong with it from a safety standpoint, but just keeping your area clean, and the whole philosophy of, cleanliness is next to godliness. I mean, it really does hold true. The more clean you keep your area, the more clean you keep your jars, the better product you're going to have at the end. And I find that holds true against any canning, food processing. Keeping your areas clean, keeping everything neat really does pay off in the long run. So right now we're going to take our brine, and I'm going to pour it in. I'm going to do it about all the way up.
Oh, that works nice.
It really does.
Really nice.
And so you can do it right from, I can do it right from the pot.
Yeah, you don't have to put it into,
into another, like a measuring cup or something like that. So I tell you what, I've got that right about 1/4 inch from the top. Now, they make a really handy tool. So this one right here is actually a dual function tool. One of them is I can check my headspace, and I'm on the second notch, which I'm right there on my second notch.
That goes. Okay.
And the other thing this tool can do is it removes air bubbles.
And that's something you have to worry about.
You do, and really what it's about is heat transfer. And that's really important. And we'll talk a little bit about that during especially the high pressure canning. But what you want is good heat transfer, and air is more of an insulator than it is anything else. So what we want is make sure we get as much of the air bubbles out. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just sort of sticking this tool down inside of there, making sure that any air bubbles come out. So now that I've done that,
Looks pretty simple.
It's pretty easy, and really all you're doing is just kind of stirring stuff around. And then just for good measure,
ah, that's interesting.
hit it a couple times like that, and it should work. Now, finally, I have my lids right here. They've been boiling. They've softened the lid up just a little bit on the underside, and you'll see that seal on the other side right there.
I see that.
Now, what we've done by boiling is we've softened that up just a little bit. Now, remember, it's hot, so just like that. I'm going to take my collar right here.
And you tighten it down real tight?
No, what I do, here's what I do. I tighten it down, and I tighten it about just snug, and then maybe another 1/8 of a turn.
Okay.
And then the trick is back it off slightly.
Now, why do you back it off?
And the reason you're doing that is that this is going to act like a check valve. It's going to allow the air to come out during the canning process, allow it to escape as it expands, but then when it cools, that lid needs to be held down in place so that it actually seals back down.
So it doesn't move back and forth.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now we're going to get the seal, and from there we're going to get that telltale pop sound that we talked about earlier. So I like to go tight.
Yep.
And then then back it off just a little bit.
Okay.
Now that's key for it to operate properly and to get a good seal.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
We're ready to put these in the canner, so if you don't mind putting them in the canner.
Put them in there.
Now I'm going to have you use the tool right here to show, grab them by the top.
Oh, just like that, huh?
Just like that.
Ooh, I've got a good grip on it.
There you go. Now we've arranged them inside. Now I'm not sure if we can get a good shot of this, but if we've arranged them inside in a circle, and you want to have as much space, evenly spaced in between them, that's going to allow the water to, to penetrate through and make sure you get good contact with that boiling water in the water bath and the jars that are inside. So we've done that. All of our lids are on. Our brine is in. Our vegetables are in. We're ready to can.
So I got to ask you this, Rick. There's still plenty of room in my canner. Do I need to have it full all the time?
Now, you don't need to have it full, but if I were doing this in my home, what I would do is probably do a double batch.
Okay.
And you could double stack, and actually our canner comes with another rack that sits on top. Yep.
I think this is it right here, right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
And basically what we'll do is we'll set that on top of the jars that are in there, and we can set a whole other layer on top of it.
Okay.
But for ease of use today, we're just going to go ahead and do it this way. Now, what you got to make sure is whatever jars you're using, that you can close the lid and there's no interference. So as long as it can all fit within there, that's great. Now, in water bath canning, it's also important to know that you have to be able to cover all the jars completely with water and an extra ½ an inch. So if the jars are too tall, you can only do a single batch. But if you're doing jelly jars, and I have one right here that I think that was done earlier, these are double stack. These are perfect for double stacking. But you also want to get a separation between the two because you don't want any insulation. That's what that rack helps you do.
This will be perfect.
Exactly. That's the reason for it. So right now we're just going to do a single stack today. We got now what we're going to do is we have the jars in there, and the key now is we're going to add water to the canner to about a ½ an inch. It's not real precise. You can go a full inch over the top of these things. What you really want to do is make sure that jar is completely immersed. Now it also gives off steam during the process, so you also want to have a little bit more so that as it evaporates in the process, you don't expose the top of the jars. Okay. So that's why it doesn't have to be really precise, but at least a ½ an inch, a full inch is more.
Water then.
Perfect.
Okay.
Now if you could just add that to right over the top.
Just a little over
That's
the top.
That's perfect.
Right there, huh? Okay.
Right there.
Yeah.
Now the jars are fully submerged. They're on a rack. The other thing is in the bottom here, I failed to say this earlier, we have a rack that goes in the bottom. It keeps them up off of the bottom of the pot. Right. And that's important too because that jars have to be fully immersed in that water. And by getting them up off the bottom, you're making sure the bottoms have that water around them as well. So okay, we've plugged the canner in.
Can I shut it yet?
You can shut it right now.
Okay.
Go ahead and twist it.
Oh, locks it right in there.
Right, like that.
So yeah.
It's about I say it's about a 30-degree turn counterclockwise. And then you'll notice on top we have this right here.
Looks kind of like a weight. What is?
It's exactly what it is.
It is a weight.
It's a weight. And when you'll see there's a little arrow on top and some lettering on there. One says airtight.
Yep.
And the other one says exhaust or vent.
Okay.
Now you'll see that we want, right now what we want for water bath canning is we want it set to exhaust. So if you line that arrow up with the words exhaust,
yep.
Just like that. There you go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the front of the unit. I'm going to let you do this.
Okay.
I want you to hit the button that says WB for water bath. That's on the far left side on the top.
Okay.
All the way in the top there.
Oh, right here.
Yep. Push that once.
So just once?
Yep.
Okay.
Now add the time, and in this case it's 20 minutes for processing.
Okay, so we're all ready. I got it sealed down, locked down, right?
Exactly.
Counterclockwise. Yep.
It's all locked on. Yep. We have the vent set to exhaust.
Okay.
Now, if you could hit that button on top that says WB for water bath.
Right there?
Yep. And now the processing time on these is 20 minutes. So if you see on the right-hand side where it says time and the plus button,
right here. Yep.
We're going to push that until it says 20.
Okay. Pretty simple.
Pretty darn simple.
20 minutes.
Now you'll see the red button that says start, stop. Just hit it once.
Right here.
And there you go. And you see it looks like a little chaser on the racetrack like that?
Yeah.
What that's telling you is that it's in the heating up process. So what's going to happen next is we have a heater inside that's going to heat that water to boiling.
Like a preheat, huh?
Yeah, like a preheat.
Okay.
And there's a sensor inside as well. It senses when it hits the boiling point. So 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll sense that. And then it'll begin the countdown timer of 20 minutes. So one of the things nice about our canner is it does a lot of these things that you'd have to do with a manual timer or make sure you're keeping track of it. It does it for you. In this case, it shows you that it's operating, it's heating up, and this will take probably 5 to 10 minutes for that water to get up to boiling. But once it does, the timer will count down to 20. Then we're going to leave it in there for a little bit, like 5 extra minutes. We're going to take the top off and we're going to remove the jars, set them on a cloth like that, and we'll wait for them to cool and hear that telltale pop sound.
Okay. That's kind of nice because then it allows me to do other things. I can clean up all the mess that I made.
That's exactly what I do. Yep. Yeah, once you're done with it, you can put everything away and it's going to do it all on its own on the side.
Okay. Cool.